So, hi everybody. Welcome to political science, and then welcome to political science workshop on writing. This is the best thing that's ever going to happen to you. Mark my words. I'm Kate Koritsky. You have it right there. I am a lead writing TA in political science. I teach teaching assistants, the people with whom you're going to be interacting quite a lot, how to introduce writing instruction in tutorial, okay? So I want to do this session. Hi. I want to do this session on a thesis statement, okay? Political science is a writing discipline. This is how we communicate, we write, and it's a thesis-driven one, okay? However, having said this, many students are intimidated by the thesis. We don't always make it clear what we mean by it. So here is me going to tell you how to nail it, okay? So please ask questions. We have 20 minutes, half an hour. There will be a lot, but I'll have a lot of examples. I will talk a little bit, and then you will do some work, and then we'll talk together, okay? So it should be fine. All right, so talk about the thesis, practice thesis, talk about the thesis. Thesis, thesis, thesis. Okay. At the end, I will ask you to do an evaluation, which I would really appreciate if you did do. I actually will not let you leave unless you give me one. So they're right here anyway. I'll distribute them later. Okay, so here we go. So the thesis statement in political science, okay? What is it? So I start with this by saying it's not an opinion, it's not a fact, and it's not a topic. And we will go through examples of these in a second, so don't worry. It is a proposition, it's a stipulation that explains something and uses evidence to do it. So think of it in terms yx because A and B, okay? This sounds a little hairy, but we'll get to it, okay? You can actually get the copy of these slides, so you don't have to write this furiously. Sorry, okay? So just email Lauren, and she will just send them to you, so don't worry. So the first, I said that the thesis statement is not an opinion, okay? So I'm giving you two statements here. The decade of Roma inclusion is the best thing that happened to Roma. Right? Statement one. Statement two is I will demonstrate that the decade of Roma inclusion benefited the Roma in Europe by looking at the initiative X and Y and their outcomes, and I will argue. The second is a thesis statement, the first is an opinion. So the difficulty we have with an opinion in political science is that we don't know who is speaking, on what authority, and based on what evidence. And it's just, an opinion is a beginning of a thesis, but it is never a thesis, okay? So you can clearly see a distinction between the two. And the second statement is clearly trying to explain something to you. And what that explain, the why and the because, if I were to restate this, the second statement is going to explain to the reader why Roma should be the happiest people on earth after the decade of Roma inclusion in Europe, okay? That's a controversial statement, by the way. You don't have to buy it. The thesis statement is not a fact, okay? So I'm giving you a list of, there are three sentences there. Roma live in Europe, Roma are discriminated against, Roma are discriminated against in France. Okay, the problem with these are not even facts. They're just statements. They become facts the moment you provide evidence for them. But even if with evidence, they're still not a thesis, okay? A thesis will have to be reframed into a why, because, supported by evidence relationship, okay? Easy peasy so far, right? Okay, it's not a topic. All right, so here we have reasons for discriminations. I'm interested in reasons for discrimination in the world. Or I'm interested in global inequality. Okay, this is all great, but it's too broad. You can't, your papers are like 5 to 10 pages. Like no one can really answer these questions in 5. So you need to focus and narrow. You need to say when, you need to say what is inequality. So this is just the beginning. This is only a mark of your interest area. This is nowhere near a thesis for you, okay? You have to think why, because. Okay, so to go back to what it is. So first is to stipulate something is to express doubt, okay? To argue something is to use evidence. And to explain is to marry concepts with empirical data. I will show you examples of thesis statements and we will clearly show you which is which. Okay, the first one is here. In this paper, I will examine whether Canada exhibits effective political participation. I will assess effective political participation by tracing voter turnouts in the last federal, provincial, and municipal election. My indicator of participation is a good way of gauging Dahl's ideals because and this would have to be filled out, and I will demonstrate that Canada has no effective participation because. So this is an effective thesis statement, okay? It is. The doubt is here is that you're not taking anything for granted, not you yourself and not the reader. You have to explain what the political participation is. You have to explain why the voter turnout has anything to do with the political participation, why they relate. And then you have to explain, Canada, for instance, may demonstrate that in federal election, 60% of electorate participates, and in municipal it will be like 45. Well, then you will have to explain to the reader, is 45 good? Is 60 good? It could be, and that's where you will have to make your proposition. So there is doubt, there is argument in that you will look at empirical information and you make it very clear what it is. Voter turnouts in the last 3 elections. So you provide kind of brackets on this conversation. 3 elections, the last election, we know exactly what you're going to look at. The Dahl here is a person who speaks about effective participation. It was part of a question that would be easier in the course, but he provides the idea of effective participation against which you're going to be making the argument. So do you see what I mean here? That this statement differs from the ones that we saw before. Okay, the why, the because, the evidence, and tight focus. Okay? Okay, I've got 2 more, and here I will ask you. So first we read them. We'll start with the first one, and then we'll go to the second one. Development is unequal, and this is inevitable. The North exploits the South, and this has not changed in 300 years. I draw on Lenin and Venezuela's to make that claim. I look at the example of Guatemala and examine its trade patterns in the last 5 years to demonstrate my point. It's not a perfect thesis statement, but it's not bad at all. So now I would like you either tell me or take a piece of paper and write down what is the why question and what is the because here. Okay? Just a second, let just the people who want to write down will write, and then we'll go from there. Are we ready? No, not yet, okay. All right, who wants to go first?
So the why question is, why is unequal development inevitable, and because is Lenin and Venezuela's and the trade patterns in Guatemala in the last 5 years?
Very good. That's one. There is more than one. Who has another one? That's very good. Right on. But there is more. Look at the first sentence of this statement.
why is development unequal in
Yeah.
the north, and because the north exploits the south?
Right? So you have a relationship, and then it's also tight. It only looks at Guatemala, it looks at 5 years, you don't. I mean, it's kind of a difficulty here is that you're telling us that, you know, Lenin and Valenzuela's talk about this for 300 years. That has been happening for 300 years. They haven't been talking about it for 300 years. And yet you're only going to be looking at 5 years. That's fine. Don't worry about this. That's why they're not perfect, but they're pretty tight, okay? So now let's look at the second one, and I'll ask you to do the same thing. This is a very similar statement that argues entirely different things, and you will see. Development is unequal, and this is inevitable. The inequality, however, benefits both North and the South. Even though the North benefits more, the South also benefits to trickle-down economics. I rely on Washington consensus literature to examine Nigeria and its trade and growth patterns in the last 5 years to demonstrate my point. What is the why, because question here? Go ahead and write if you need to, but just give a second to those who want to think about it. This is a little bit more tricky, but there are similar arguments that yet something entirely different is being argued here. Okay, a gentleman at the back wanted to give it a crack. Okay, go ahead.
It's about why the unequal distribution in the global economics is actually beneficial for both parties.
Fantastic. That's one why. And what is there a because there? Yes.
Yeah, because of trickle down economics. Right?
Exactly. Very good. So they're both why and because. Is there more why because relationships is stipulated here? The answer may be perhaps the same, but the why question could be, why are some countries benefiting from trickle-down economics? Okay? I'm sorry, why are some countries benefiting from inequality? Because of trickle-down economics.
Also, isn't it because of the Washington consensus literature?
Well, the Washington consensus literature doesn't do anything, it only explains, right? Like you have to remember that what is written by people is contestable. You buy it or you don't buy it, but you have to explain why. So the Washington consensus would be only your conceptual framework with which you work, but it's not in itself doing anything, although that's again not quite true. Washington consensus does do things. But anyway, these examples are not quite real. I just made them up without looking up any data. So this is just, don't quote me on that. Well, if you want to make these statements, go ahead, but that won't serve you right. So we've got two very tight, good things. Okay. Now, I want you to now do the work. Okay, you've got, I'm giving you gun violence, Toronto and Chicago. You write me a thesis statement. You are welcome to use make-up data, you know, and kind of evidence. Like, I don't know how many, there is a disparity in favor of Toronto, obviously. But you can make up the percentages, okay? So just give me a thesis statement. Take a few minutes. It's worth it. It's worth it. These are 3 long thesis statements. Wrap it up, wrap it up. Has everybody finished the first one?
Oh, I'm supposed to choose one.
No, you're supposed to write in the first one.
Oh, okay.
You've done the second?
Yeah.
Okay, we have to start. Who wants to go first? You want to start?
Me? Oh, I don't know. I just made this up.
Yes, okay. Please give us the thesis statement, not to worry.
Well, gun violence is consistently lower in Toronto than Chicago, according to Stats Canada. There is a gun culture in Chicago that lends glamour to violence as shown by popular tattoo results.
Okay, that is very interesting. I think it's good in that you are pointing to evidence, both in the fact that there is a disparity, and you're trying to prove that there is culture of violence, and you're doing this through tattooing. That is as a statement that is good. You would in kind of, if this were a real paper, you would have read something on top, of course, and there would be some kind of conceptual framework on which you could draw on to think about culture. Okay, very, very good. Why? Because relationship. Go ahead.
As I stipulate that gun violence in Toronto is greater than in Chicago. This is demonstrated by statistics on gun-related homicides in both Toronto and Chicago over the period 1999 to 2010. I postulate that this is due to lower regulations on the purchase and use of firearms in Toronto than Chicago.
Very good. Again, the same addition would have to be made, that you would perhaps need to look at some literature on institutional framework that makes it so in Chicago rather than Toronto, but very good. Anybody who wants to go next? One more.
Okay. I'm not done.
Okay, that's fine. Give us what you have. This is a redrafting idea, right? So this is it's fun.
Rates of gun violence among youth in Toronto, Canada surpasses the American city of Chicago. This increase in gun violence in youth has been attributed to higher rates of poverty in inner cities.
There you are clearly, you're getting the idea that there is a why and there is a because which you're trying to answer. Yes, that's fun. That's very good. Now, someone who has done democracy question, because that is a little bit more. Go ahead. It's a little more abstract to begin with. That's why I want you to go there. Okay, please.
But the thing about me is I don't structure it as like.
Okay, read what you and we'll see.
Due to the pernicious presence of bureaucracy which cannot be controlled democratically, as was the case with the growing influence of the military-industrial complex which dragged the U.S. into a variety of conflicts, renders a system which takes away the sovereignty which lays in the hands of the citizenry and other democratic institutions.
Okay, so first of all, you will have to make it into 5 sentences rather than 1. That's a first statement.
Oh, okay.
And it is, at the moment, a little bit too sounding like an opinion rather than an analytical statement, okay? You would need to tease out more of these. There are most certainly why, because relationships there, but you would need to point to other indicators. What you're basically suggesting is a democracy that is kind of transporting violence out of its borders,
So
kind of.
basically what I'm trying to say is you can't control the bureaucracy within the democracy, like bureaucratic systems.
Right. Okay. So this is does everybody hold that thought? Does anybody want to? Does anybody have one that you want to share? Okay. Hold that thought. We will come back to this because this is a segue to my next point. Brilliant. Okay.
I said democracy is the best form of government because it institutes, it's the best at instituting universal values by using sense, conception,
Mm-hmm.
of political rights and civil liberties. I will examine X country between this state and this state, and X country between this state and this state, to discover which system better delivers those values.
And what were your indicators that would indicate that one country is better than the other? Did you have one? I'm sorry.
Civil liberties and political rights.
Okay, that's fine, but these would still need to be teased out. How are you going to know if civil rights and liberties are protected, right? I'm saying it's a good beginning, but it would have to be more specific. Like, because to say that rights are written into Constitution is not enough, right? We all know that rights can be abused notwithstanding. Okay, so let me just move us to next slide. And these are final thoughts, but this connects precisely to the question, to the final point that was made. If an assignment asks a question, answer it. And the reason this is a segue, because you went more in the direction of bureaucracy. This is doable, but you have to frame it differently. You have to stick with the framework of an assignment and say, democracies are perhaps, may be considered the best regimes in the world, but have failings because the penetration of democracy, bureaucracy. You got your thesis statement. The way you framed it, it was like you're more interested in bureaucracy and you don't really care about the assignment and you're going to write on what you want rather than the prof. Listen, we can spot it, okay? So the first rule is if there is a question, your thesis has to answer it, okay? No wishy-washy, just say it. Say it so we're not confused, and say it early. If assignment does not ask a question, it just sort of says, write about democracy being the best or not the best, explore, then you ask a question. You frame it in your head into the kind of why, because, or how, because, okay? This is going to help you tremendously. Use as direct language as possible. Use active voice. Use short sentences. So active voice, example is, the father cleaned the house. The house was cleaned by the father. Ha ha. Sorry, ha ha. The active voice would say, father cleaned the house. Fewer words, easy to read, direct, punchy. So if you have a lot of sentences that have was and by, you're in a passive word, and that's not good. Okay? So direct language, short sentences, active voice, show, don't tell, start early and rework. The adjective is the enemy of the noun. That is together with show, don't tell. Look at your opening paragraph or your paper and just on one page remove every adjective and see how that reads. You will find out that every time that you're using very, great, you're amplifying rather than giving evidence. There are usually a dead giveaways that you're not really sure, you don't want to sound unsure, so you will use an adjective, okay? So I'm just sort of saying it's a good sign for you, short sentence, no adjectives, evidence. Okay. Any questions?
I know some faculty don't want us to use first person. Does political science one want us to use third person instead, or is it our...
As I showed you in the examples, both are, as long as you're direct and it's clear who is arguing, you can, I will show you here. So here development is unequal. So you're making both types of the statements, and I is perfectly acceptable in every subdiscipline of political science. That's the word. That's my discipline. But yes, you're perfectly fine, and you're perfectly fine not to use it, but don't be afraid. It does also don't overuse it. There are papers that just I is at the beginning of each sentence. Just like give some voice to your evidence as well. Okay. Any other questions? Mm-hmm.
So you talked about the conceptual framework that you have to use for Lenin and Valenzuela. So how does that? So if you think about a thesis as investigating like causality in a certain topic,
Yes.
where does the analytical framework fit into that?
Most likely, the anchor of it will be in the course. Okay, the anchor will be in the course, or if it's totally open, sometimes you're just pick a question, pick a topic. My step of finding the analytical framework would be to kind of read an article or two on a topic, and then kind of see where the bibliography takes you from there, and see if you agree, disagree, and why, and then try to talk to your TA, talk to the professor where you can take it. But usually the course will give you enough materials, okay? So these are writing resources. First and foremost, your TA. Ask them for writing help, and ask them during tutorial, think of this idea that they need to be guiding you. The rest are U of T resources, which you probably know about. Use them. So now evaluation. So thank you very much. You've been a good group, and very short. Please complete it. You can't leave.